it is a conflict in just that, like, she's now pregnant with her baby, but also how it affects her decisions, how it affects her mentally, that now, even though she tried to leave Ryle, in a way, she's tethered to him for the rest of her life, for the rest of the baby's life. So for me, personally, it does feel very, like, shock value-y, very much like, oh, we need to throw in a wrench in her plans, like, something that's just done for the plot, and I really don't like that, because, again, I feel like it's just very underdeveloped, because the namesake of the book, and towards the end, where, like, her baby is the contributing factor to whether or not she stays or leaves Ryle, you would think that the baby would play a much more prominent role, especially with her inner dialogue. I just wish we got more of her, like, really thinking about it. I thought that when she found out that she was pregnant, it would have really, like, forced her as a character to think about the things that she has been putting herself through by, like, explaining away Ryle's abuse, trying to cover it up, actively trying to convince herself that she's not going through the same things that her mother was going through. Now that she's pregnant, that she has to really, like, take a hard look at herself. And again, not to say that any victims are, like, in any way culpable for the things that they go through or that they're to blame, but just to really, like, think about what decisions she is going to have to make now that she's making them for another human being. Especially because, again, with the Atlas journals, in that perspective, it's her as a child, it's her experiencing the abuse as just being someone in the same household. We see how much it's affected her, especially with her relationship with her mom and her dad. So I would imagine that as she's now recognizing that she's falling into the same cycle as her mother, that this baby and the existence of this baby would play a more prominent role in her decision making. But honestly, there's so many times where the baby is just, like, not mentioned, or, like, very, like, secondary to her, like, inner dialogue. Honestly, we get more of the book where it's like her and Elisa, and they're like, oh yay, yippee, we're both pregnant at the same time, our kids are gonna be friends, let's plan the baby shower, and it's all like, yay, pregnancy is the best thing that can happen to a woman. Just neither here nor there. But I wish that they, like, really developed on it, especially because at some point Lily tells her mother, A, that she is pregnant, and B, that Ryle has been abusive towards her. So I would have really enjoyed if they took that time that she has with her mother for her to really ask, like, how having a kid impacted her decision making, because her mom, like, really talks about how it was like for her when she first started in her relationship with Lily's dad, and how it progressed and eventually spiraled out of control. But they never really talk about how Lily contributed to her overall decision making, and, like, how it impacted her, like, general life, and why she still decided to stay with Lily's dad even after she was born. We never really, like, discussed the impact of Lily's existence and how it contributed to, like, the overall dynamic of her mom and her dad, and then how that could indirectly pass down to Lily and Ryle once they have their kid. We never get any of that. So I just feel it's so underdeveloped, and they really, like, dropped the ball with this. This baby is definitely used just as, like, a conflict, a shock value, which narrative-wise is lazy. And I also don't like, especially towards the end of the book, when she starts, like, quote-unquote making amends with Ryle, you really get the sense that when she's in it with Ryle, that she is, like, not necessarily being truthful. She's kind of an unreliable narrator in which she's talking about her situation, and she's really, like, denying that she's in an abusive relationship. And then even after the fact, we see her kind of, like, explaining Ryle's behaviors, and even, like, misremembering her own past and her own trauma. And she keeps saying, like, oh, my dad was a good person, he had his good moments, and he did love me. Throughout her entire journals, we never get a moment in which he seems like a human being. There's one moment in which her father shows any kind of behavior that is not abusive. And that's literally, he comes home, he eats a cookie, and he says, wow, you baked a nice cookie. That's it. And that is the only moment in which we see him act like a human being. And
no, that's not true. You saw a lot of my earlier work, you would not believe I have it.
Lily has for him being a good person, because he complimented her on a cookie. Like, Lily keeps telling us that her dad was a good person and had his good moments, but they never show us said moments. So this is
my colored pencils go?
Like, show don't tell.
I'll get them later.
Me that he was a good person. Give me a scene. give me anything more than the crumbs you're throwing at me, Colleen Hoover. So narrative-wise, it's just very like lacking. And of course, the ending is so incredibly rushed. There was so much build-up at the beginning of the story, and pacing-wise, I wasn't even upset. Like it was okay. We had like a good rhythm going, and then the end is like she goes from like I don't know about you, Ryle, to they're living together in the same house. He's cooking her breakfast and kisses her on the forehead. There was even a line, and I wasn't gonna bring this up, but I would literally, like, I would never live with myself if I never mentioned this. There's a part in this last chapter where Lily wakes up and she's like, oh, I smell toast. Ryle knows it's my favorite. And then it's actually Ryle making her toast. And I'm like, do we not see the irony? Is that not, like, funny? Because the last time she said those exact words about Ryle making her toast in the morning is the morning after she escaped him. The morning after she had to literally leave in the middle of the night, in the darkness of night, after he tried to R-word her, headbutted her so hard that her head split open, and then she found out she was pregnant with his child. She wakes up the next morning to Atlas making her breakfast and says the very same line, and there is no callback, and there's no reference. There's not even like a split second where she's like, oh my god, I thought this exact same thing when I actually escaped him. There's no irony there. And I don't think that that was on purpose. I think we're supposed to be like, oh, cute, he's making her toast. So this last chapter literally is them like seemingly back together, happily ever after. Really like, honestly, another thing I hate about the baby thing is that it's supposed to be like the deciding factor in her decision, and yet we never really have an inkling about what she'll choose. And Colleen does that on purpose because her whole thing is she was like, oh no, it's supposed to be like plot twisty, it's supposed to be plot twisty. No, get out of here. So that last chapter is literally her being happily married couple with Ryle, no qualms about that for some reason, and then she's rushed to the hospital, gives birth in record time, probably sneezed and birthed that baby out, and then she decides, no, it ends with us. Ryle, I can't stay with you, we are getting divorced. The end. So from a plot perspective, there's a lot of like inconsistencies, and I'll get more into it when I like go into their characters, but they were trying to juggle like so many serious topics, and personally I think it might have accomplished a little bit more if we took out the sex scenes. If we just like, God forbid, had a serious thought for a minute that didn't involve like toe licking, because that's in the book, maybe we could have accomplished more with what we were trying to say. Colleen Hoover has said in the past that her books are mainly for entertainment purposes. She doesn't write to persuade, tell a message, or anything like that, but that this book is
I disagree with that. I think no matter what you write, when you create something, you are trying to convince someone. Maybe not intentionally, but if you're like writing something, you are writing your own. You're putting yourself in there, and you have like certain politics or something. And no matter what, like even if it's just for entertainment, you are like trying to convince them of something. Whether it's that, oh, they're the bad guys, or oh, even if it is just like
starting with Ryle Kincaid,
unobtrusively, but
embodiment
still
had a daughter, became a feminist. First of all, Ryle is incredibly creepy. So Ryle took a picture of Lily the night that they first met, which at this point in the book has been like over 6 months ago, and Lily finds out that he has a picture, like that picture of her, he took of her, put it on a massive canvas, and hung it in his apartment, and that's supposed to be romantic. If that happened to me, I would literally cry. I would change my name, change my identity, and go into witness protection. That's crazy. There's also a point in which he goes to her apartment and knocks on every single door until he finds her apartment, because he doesn't know her apartment number, and he only vaguely knows the apartment building because she pointed it out. The first night they met each other 6 months ago, bangs on every door, finds her door, and then begs her to have sex with him, and it's supposed to be romantic and sweet or whatever, which I will extend the benefit of the doubt. And maybe Colleen Hoover threw this in so that we as the reader could be lulled into a false sense of security and all these touch-starved bitches could say, oh my god, that's so romantic. But really, all of our mega brains.
I don't think it's romantic. I think that's a wish fulfilled. It's like a wish fantasy. Like, oh, I want a guy who will want me so bad he'll like knock on the door and beg me and beg to be with me. That's not romantic. That's desperate.
No, I think I'm giving her too much credit. Because I'm sorry.
That's desperate. And if someone actually did in real life, you'd be like, ugh, what are you doing? You couldn't text me? Hi.
Me? No. I definitely think that his character perpetuates a certain idea where it's like men can get away with a certain amount of stuff if they're hot enough. I also think that this book is very much inspired by Grey's Anatomy. Ryle is a neurosurgeon with a dark past or whatever. Lily is like
I'm good.
dark and twisty and has a bad relationship with a father.
I haven't been
figure.
feeling like
All I'm gonna
coloring
say
in the
is that
longest
when
time. I
you
have like I did this one. I
I
did this one. But I don't feel like coloring. But now I'm not a color, but where's my gray?
Will let anything go if you're hot enough. This is before the abuse actually starts to like really take hold in this relationship. Then during
How are you,
/
Joe
after the
Koa?
abuse, quote unquote, Ryle is
I should have asked that
interested.
earlier.
His abuse is just, pure bursts of anger attributed to his trauma, and that A, he can't control it, and B, doesn't realize he's doing it. Again, referencing that he blacks out, which he says himself that he blacks out and doesn't realize what he's doing. So again, and this ties in a little bit more.
Then you shouldn't be a surgeon. If you get so mad you black out and you like can't control it, why would anyone want you cutting them open?
When it happens. But this all gets thrown away the third time Ryle abuses Lily. At this time, Elisa has just given birth and Lily is coming home. Ryle has already been home for a while and he is waiting for Lily. He has read a news article about the best new businesses in Boston, one of them being Atlas's. Atlas is the owner / chef at a restaurant called Bibs, and in this newspaper article he talks about the reason he named it Bibs, which stands for Best in Boston, or Better in Boston, I'm sorry, which is a reference to something he told Lily, and he even says that it was inspired by a girl. So Ryle goes through all of Lily's journals and finds a magnet that she has on their fridge that says Better in Boston, and he makes the connection. He's like, oh my god, you're cheating on me with Atlas. You actually love him. Why do you have his stuff in our apartment? So he's waiting for Lily to come home. And
I feel like Better in Boston would be like a very common tourist trap thing.
But, it's not like
Just
a conversation that he has with her, no. Now, there is an article that I saw that talked more in depth about this.
I thought this was a skin color the whole time. This says pale pink. My dumbass. I think it's this one.
Criticizing it ends with us, so I'll read it now. The third incident, however, reveals Ryle to be sadistic, premeditating, and cruel. It is not an example of a
Shocking, shocker. The sadistic and cruel abuser who hits his girlfriend is sadistic and cruel.
Ryle discovers Lily has kept a small gift, a refrigerator magnet given to her by her high school boyfriend. This enrages him with jealousy, and when she returns home that evening, he's waiting for her in the dark, holding the magnet.
Oh, that sounds scary.
Encounter with Lily, and while digitally her with one hand and pulling her hair to the point of peeing with the other. Demands she tell him who gave her the magnet. This is frightening and humiliating for Lily, but she is too afraid to disobey. What follows is a R-word attempt that results in multiple physical injuries, including a scream-inducing bite and a headbutt that knocks Lily unconscious. Throughout the attack, Ryle is disturbingly calm. So what we know from this specific incident in the book is that this was premeditated. This was not a blackout because, again, Ryle is waiting for her when she comes home. This is not
a blackout
like a
is
burst of
way
anger
too
because
convenient
it's
for an
pretty much
abuser.
gone
Oh, you
out,
black
which
out?
lulls her into a false sense of security.
It's funny how you only
Engages
black
her
out
in
with
sexual
your victim.
activities, and he continuously tries to hurt her and scare her even when she asks him to stop and tells him that he's hurting her. We can also tell that it's premeditated because, again, he read through the entire newspaper, he kept it, and he then read through all of Lily's journals because we see them strewn out all over their bed. It's
God.
also disturbing.
I'd break up with someone for that. You read through my old high school journals,
He says
I'd have
that
to break up with
he
you.
hasn't shown her how much he loves her, and that his abuse will show her that. So all of this is not just a burst of anger, it's not even a temper tantrum, and it is definitely not a blackout as the book tried to tell us. Ryle's character is meant to be like, oh, tortured guy with inner demons that he has to battle for the love of his life, right? His inner demons are meant to be portrayed as something that he can't necessarily control, but we see so often after he abuses
This looks really
Lily
good.
or does anything to
I think this
her
is the
that he
best one
tries
that's looked.
to explain
Yeah, I
away
think this
what
one
he
looks the
did.
best
We
out of
see
all of
him
them at the
recognize
beginning. I haven't even done any colored pencil
he's
yet.
bad, but he still tries to cover it
This
up
one, I
and,
think this one looked
literally
okay.
gaslight
That's
her.
nothing.
Again, the second time when Ryle
That's nothing.
pushes her down the stairs,
Thank you.
he tries to convince her
Yeah,
that she's
she
bad.
didn't look
He's
too good. I think because the marker I have is
it's
dying, so
something
she didn't
to
look too
her,
good
something
at
bad
the marker
enough that
stage.
he should lie about it. That's not a
She's not
blackout.
marker.
That's not him not knowing what he's doing. It's premeditated. It's him being
She
completely
looked
conscious
horrible.
of
When I was drawing without the colored pencil really ties it all together with her. I fucked up bad. Oh, this one's my favorite. This one, she also did not look too good. I've noticed I only draw women now that I'm doing this. Besides, what's his name? Periwinkle? But yeah, she's like, I think she's the best one I've done so far. Well, not so far. But yeah, because the marker I used was dying. She also didn't look too good without colored pencil. But she looks pretty good. I could end right here and that'd be great. I wish I could stop and take a picture. Can I take a screenshot? Wait, give me a second. Can I take a screenshot? It works! I took a screenshot. My dumbass never thought. Damn, every time I draw live, I'm like, oh, I don't want to stop and like, so I can take a picture.
Only the like trauma and panic attack that she had afterwards that like brings her to her senses and is like forced her to push on her. It says so abundantly that he's a bad person and that he's doing it on purpose and he knows what he's doing is bad. But
Where's my pencil in here?
So overall, he's just like he's not.
These are my colored pencils.
He's not like a person with inner demons or past trauma.
That reminds me, I need to go to the bank.
Because we see so often that like his inner demons or whatever that he can't control it is just not true. So his whole character explanation, his whole like whatever, the fact that we're supposed to like get to know him when he's not a bad person and then when he is a bad person, we're supposed to
Also, inner demons should only hurt the person they're inside of. They shouldn't like hurt you.
What if it was your daughter? For him to finally understand that abusing women is bad. Ryle understands the dangers he has to protect his daughter from because he is the danger. And honestly, he's the worst version of it. He knows how people think. He knows how men can manipulate women because he is the master of it. The fact that he had to learn, that Lily had to literally teach him, like, what if someone hurt this little thing? You wouldn't like that, right? And he was like, no, you're right. Women is bad. I am a feminist starting now. That's ridiculous. The fact that we're supposed to root for that character arc for Ryle, oh my god. My standards are so much higher than that. And my standards are on the floor. So overall, Ryle Kincaid, the embodiment of
Like red highlights? Would this work?
Narrative's insistence that he's
No, I
a
don't
good
know.
person.
Oh, auburn. With red. Like a
I will
reddish
preface
brown.
Because I do have to preface this. There is no perfect victim. I can recognize that. She is not a perfect person, and neither do I expect her to be. The criticisms that I have are specifically on the writing of her character, and they cannot in any way be applied to real life people. So, let's get that out of the way first. Okay. Lily's character arc is dependent on her realizing that she cannot, quote-unquote, control Ryle's anger and prevent her abuse from happening. She has to make this decision not only for herself, but for her baby. As I mentioned earlier, I thought her thought process and the things that she was going through at the beginning of the story were meant to portray her as an unreliable narrator. She's rationalizing the abuse that she's going through, and she's kind of like excusing Ryle's behaviors. And I
Lots of people excuse their...
believe that that's not true, that Lily is not necessarily understanding the full extent of the situation that she's in, and that we as the reader are not supposed to put any merit to her rationale. We as the reader are supposed to recognize that what Ryle is doing is wrong, and that Lily's, reasoning or anything that she says in terms of like explaining his anger or trying to avoid it from happening is not meant to actually be of any importance. We're supposed to recognize that you can't explain why someone is abusive. There's no reasoning for it, and there's nothing that can ever explain why someone would put their hands on you. After she leaves Ryle, we're supposed to see a transition where she comes to terms with her situation, but it never really happens. First of all, she has this idea, this fallacy, that someone that loves you can hurt you even after the fact. After Ryle literally put a hole in her skull, she thinks that he loves her, which I can say, Ryle probably thinks he loves her, but he's also an abuser. He's not in his right sense of mind. So he probably believes that he really truly does love her. But I think that it's not necessarily a good thing to portray by having her say that, like, she actually thinks he loves her, or that people that love you can hurt you. And I say that in, like, the physical sense, that, like, someone that loves you could also put their hands on you and physically hurt you on purpose. And I don't know if I can say too much about this, but I can definitely say someone who loves you will definitely not put their hands on you, and they will absolutely not do it multiple times. Or
you can remove these papers now.
She also suddenly has, like, a massive change of heart about her dad because she realizes the similarities between Ryle and her dad. From the beginning of the story, we get, like, oh, I hate my dad, to the point where she says, for his eulogy, I'm gonna say all the good things about my dad. And then she says nothing. That's what she said at his literal funeral. Amazing move on her part. Literally queen behavior. So we go from that. We go from all this resentment she has towards her dad to suddenly, my dad was a good person. He did love me. He just didn't know how to show me. From a plot perspective, from a writing perspective, we see no transition. The only reason she has a change of heart about her dad is because she suddenly realizes, oh my god, my dad and Ryle are the same person. They're both incredibly abusive and hate their wives. But I love Ryle, so therefore I love my dad. We never see her confront her own false reasoning. We never see her really, like, think to herself, like, oh man, I really tried to explain away the things Ryle was doing to me, and that just wasn't true. There's so many instances throughout the book where she blames herself or, you know, other outside factors for what Ryle did. For example, she blames herself for not throwing away Atlas's phone number, because maybe if she did, Ryle wouldn't have thrown her down the stairs. And then she's like,
He would have found another reason to throw you down the stairs.
He wanted to, and maybe he wouldn't have thrown me down the stairs. We never see her confront her own false ideas that she in any way had the power to avoid the abuse that happened to her. Which again, if she was meant to be an unreliable narrator, if we were not really supposed to put any merit to her reasoning and rationale and the things that she was thinking while she was experiencing the abuse from Ryle, then we should have seen that undone. We should have seen her go back and think about all the things that she was doing and all the rationales and really, like, come face to face and say that was wrong. Like, that's not true. I was trying to make it work, and I can't. Which again, for a book that's supposed to be written for women that experience domestic violence, it's crucial to say in the narrative, in the book, that these reasonings, these rationales aren't true. You can't do anything to avoid abuse from an abusive person because it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. But it's Colleen Hoover's responsibility to make this evident in the book, which she didn't. I will say,
I'm listening to a deep dive into It Ends With Us, line analyzing plot, comma, characters, comma, and the controversy by Listen to Kirsten.
That he would have had no right, no reasoning to put his hands on her. And overall, Colleen Hoover does make good commentary about how, as a society, we tend to blame women for not leaving, and we don't put any of the blame on the actual abusers in the situation. And all of that is delivered through Lily's, like, inner monologue. So I will say, as a character, she's able to recognize all of these, like, nuances that come with domestic violence. But then Lily still believes that Ryle is blacking out when he abuses her, and that he is not in control of his own emotions.
I mean,
when they
it's easier to believe the person you love is blacking out and they can't control themselves, and they'd willingly do that.
Talk to her, but brings their friend Marshall to, like, intervene if he tries to hurt her again, and Lily feels bad for Ryle. She says something along the lines of like, oh my god, it must be so awful, quote, to have absolutely no control over your emotions. Throughout the book, Lily sees Ryle's anger as like a separate entity. When he's angry, it's not Ryle, it's his anger.
And because it's not Ryle, he can never be blamed, and therefore she can still love him without being her mother.
But I just personally believe that the only way you can control and regulate your emotions is to acknowledge that they are a part of you. So the fact that she even, to any degree, still believes that he cannot control his anger, and it also just ignores the fact that it's a pattern of behavior that he has. So to say that like he's not in control, or that like his anger is like a separate entity that like possesses him, is so ridiculous. I also don't like it because while Lily is pregnant, she just like loses any kind of sense of autonomy. There's a point in which she paints the nursery for the baby, right? And her mom is busy and Elisa is busy, and she's like, oh man, well I can't be by myself, so let's call Ryle. She calls Ryle to look at her mural of the nursery. Why? Because she wants someone to look at it. She just can't function by herself as a human being, I guess. Need I remind you that before this, she was a girl boss businesswoman living on her own, doing her thing. And then when Ryle comes in, he's
my other hand's
scrubs.
holding
So
a cap, my
it's
phone.
not important. But earlier on, before he becomes, physically abusive towards Lily, his scrubs are her weakness. She thinks they're so uber sexy and attractive. So now, after the fact that Ryle has physically abused her on more than one occasion, split open her skull, threw her down a flight of stairs, tried to R-word her, she sees him in his scrubs, and she says, damn, he's wearing scrubs. And it's supposed to be like, oh man, my one weakness, I'm still horny. What? Are you joking?
In this
Again,
live?
Just reiterating that Ryle is hot.
I don't know. That's how long I do this for.
For any wrongdoings. It's so cheap that they put that right in the middle of like a really tense scene. Again, she is now alone in an apartment with her abuser, and the first thing she thinks of is, damn, he's wearing scrubs and that he's hot? What a way to cheapen anything, any substantial statements we were trying to make about domestic violence. They also, in the scene, have like a whole conversation. They really like get down to the nitty gritty about, her back and forth about whether or not she wants to stay with Ryle, how it'll impact them now that they have a child together. She says, quote, I don't even believe it was intentional when you hurt me. She's a victim, and it's okay to take a while to process what you go through. But then she also says
I had a model
that her father only
that I can't find her. I drew the pencil sketch a couple days ago. So I'm just trying to draw her from memory, or color her from memory. But I'm not trying to be too realistic. I already got the. I already got the life of her down, I guess. The base.
Just straight up wrong. Because her father did hurt other people besides her mom. There's a scene in which she tells us in her Dear Ellen letters that her father threw her down onto the ground and split her skull open. So that's her mom and Lily. And then when her dad found out that she was having relations with Atlas, he beat him with a baseball bat to the point where she thought he died. So that's Lily's mom, Lily, and Atlas. And those are only the three people she talks about. So that's just a straight up lie. So for her to say like, oh, well, you're like my dad, and my dad didn't hurt anyone besides my mom. So like, I think you're okay.
I guess she
just wrong.
fuck her mom, I guess.
No merit in this conversation and doesn't really say anything about whether or not Ryle could and ever would pick their own child. And C,
I don't know how to do any of that, like mods and stuff. I don't think I need a mod.
If you only ever hit me, then that's okay. Huh? Are you joking? That's a real.
Oh, my computer's about to die. Give me a sec.
Lily decides that they will be getting a divorce, but she chooses to allow Ryle to have visitation and, play a role in their daughter's life. Which I won't say too much about that decision, but I will say that it's heavily inspired by Colleen Hoover's own life. Colleen Hoover, in her author's note, specifies that her mother was also in an abusive relationship. That her mother eventually decided to leave her father, but that, they still visited him and he still played a role in her life. So I think the ending is very heavily inspired by what happened to her in real life, and that's what we're getting here. So overall, I think Lily's character just kind of falls apart.
I'm trying to think, will marker make this look better or worse?
Not just like in terms of like who she is, but just like her character's presence in the story. We know like who she is, her morals.
I don't think I need a
but
mom
then
dated
it
by
all
Tristan.
kind of unravels, and again, most of it I have to say
I think I will
is
add some
because
marker.
Ryle is hot. I would have liked if it was addressed in the book that some of the things that Lily was saying and thinking while she was like in the thick of her abuse was not like real, or that she was like, you know, it was just her own trauma. To have her really confront her own ways of thinking, but it never happens. Her character is essentially wasted and becomes nothing more than, I can fix him. And now, moving on to the controversy. The problem with this book, and what people took issue to, is its portrayal of domestic violence, which ironically is also what people loved about it. Again, we have to consider that this book is very different from all the other Colleen Hoover books, because this one is meant for a specific message, and it's meant to, you know, say something greater than just, you know, for entertainment purposes. Her audience is primarily women, and for this book, women who have experienced DV. So we have her purpose and we have her audience. Let's go over the message she was trying to deliver with this book. An alarming message I found was that there is no such thing as bad people, only people that do bad things. It's not a message that I disagree with in any way, because I did cover it a little bit in my review of A Silent Voice, but the application in this story is meant to force us to see Ryle in a holistic way, to see him as more than an abuser. The difference between bad people and people that do bad things is one very
Not only that one's particularly good.
that being change. We as people are ever changing, and this statement highlights that our past actions do not define us as long as we're willing to change. Ryle never changes. In fact, he changes for the worst. His change is prompted by Lily physically taking herself out of the relationship, so he literally can't get to her, and by him having a kid. His motivation for change is not in any way intrinsic, and it is definitely not a choice. The only reason he decides to change is that so he can have some kind of role in his child's life. The message of this book also tells women that they need to put aside their own feelings and experiences with an abusive partner for the sake of their child. Also from the article that I referenced earlier,
I don't know if the marker adds anything too much. I think I don't think it takes anything away.
That, quote, parents have to work through their differences and bring a level of maturity into a situation in order to do what's best for their child. But Ryle is not a guy who simply has differences with his child's mother. A disagreement about allotted screen time or a number of hours spent in daycare.
Hey.
He's a dangerous criminal with a history of manipulating and victimizing a woman. Lily's decision to co-parent with Ryle is not redemptive. It's a blatant shirking of the barest parental responsibility, the responsibility to protect her daughter. Because, again, with that big conversation that Lily and Ryle have together, what she takes away is that, oh, I don't want to take away your rights as a father. It's your right to have a role in your child's
I
life.
disagree.
I take issue with this specifically because there's no guarantee that
Having a
Ryle
child
won't
is not a
take their
right.
child just because she
Having
thinks
access to your
that
child
he
is not a
will
right,
never
it's a
hit
privilege.
her. First of all, it's a wild statement.
And those privileges
on top
taken
of that,
away
you don't
when
even
you're
know
abusive.
for sure. Because
For
it
everyone's
also just,
safety.
like, contradicts her previous statement that, like, oh, Ryle is not in control of his anger, that he's blacking out, because it says to a certain degree that he can control his anger enough to only ever hit Lily and not hit their child, but that he's still somehow so, like, not in control of his anger, and that's why he's hitting Lily. So it's just like so many contradicting things that go into his character, which I won't say is a reflection on Colleen Hoover's own relationship and feelings with her father. That is not for me to say. I will say, however, that I think from a narrative perspective, it's messy. I don't know if you're trying to tell me that Ryle is a good person or not.
Is there anything
any
even else I
reasoning
can
or
draw?
rationale, you know, good points for the argument that he is a good person don't even like measure up.
Oh, my
They're
phone's about to
constantly
die.
contradicted in the actual book, and I think there is a greater
That would suck.
conversation
I
to
can
be
draw
had
one.
about,
Oh shit!
like, the initial reasoning that
Hey.
people have to
Hey, Jennifer.
do what's best for my
I completely
child,
forgot to do the
and then
backgrounds.
her still thinking that the best for her child is to have an abusive father figure in her life, someone that we know has a
Even
history
if he-
of being manipulative.
Even if Ryan, even if whatever his name is, doesn't abuse the child, the child could still see her mom being abused, and that's like just as bad. I feel like that's also like traumatizing. Where'd my markers go?
Literally no. Because even if Colleen were to say like,
what kind of blue should I do?
Choices, like this is not like to say that every woman should choose to have their abusive partner
It's more of a
stay in their
gray.
children's life. I think it can indirectly have that effect, especially with.
Will
like,
a darker
the
color
narrative
make
almost,
her
guilt
pop,
that
or would it
Lily
make
kind of
her,
pushes,
would it drown
like,
her out?
reasoning that, like, oh, I would feel
Ooh, that might be a
guilty
bit
if I
dark.
didn't have Ryle a part of this child's life, or I would feel guilty if I didn't give him the opportunity to have a child. It's so heavily laced with like guilting women, and I hate that. I think it's awful to have
Which
that as a
one?
message. And overall,
This one's light blue, this one's dark blue. Which one should I draw?
Which
I think. Would the dark blue make her stand out more?
Absolutely.
I don't know. It might just drown her out.
Could have been good. It could have said a lot of great commentary about domestic violence, and there were times where it did. But the overall delivery of the message, again, not really agreeing with itself about who Ryle is, and if he's a redeemable character,
I'll do
is a
light.
major reason why the book falls apart. It's so up in the air, it's so flip-floppy, and worst crime of all, it's explained away because he's hot. Overall,
okay, so I'm not doing light blue.
Just really missed the mark.
Sorry, beated by Tristan.
She tried so hard to like make it like big plot twist that he's abusive actually, and the fact that she still tried to play into her other writing styles.
That one's also not.
Put in a lot of like sex scenes and sort of like very intimate stuff. So I feel like it did kind of take away from the overall message.
I think I'll probably do this teal.
That valuable toe-sucking time could have gone to developing more on these characters and their inner battles as they kind of like try to think about like what they want out of their lives and the decisions they have to make. Overall, I give this book a 1 out of 5. I actually give it a 0 out of 5. I would not recommend anyone reading this book. I would not recommend anyone watching the movie. I think it's also interesting because there's so many Goodreads reviews where people were saying like, oh my god, I wish like there were so many times I wish that like Colleen Hoover would just like delete what she made Ryle do, and that we could just go back, and I wanted to give him a hug, and he was just so like, oh, I just wish he wouldn't do those bad things. And to that I say, disrespectfully, get up, get off your goddamn knees, and put them to the floor of a church. Jesus Christ. Because again, the build-up at the beginning where we're supposed to like him, I hated him. Nothing about him is redeeming. Everything we know about him from the beginning is just that he is a beta male. He's not a good person. He is just hot and horny. And that is the reason we're supposed to root for him. That's the reason
I gotta wash this jar out.
we're supposed to feel some kind of conflict about whether or not Lily should stay with him. Which I think sacrificing your overall message to have a character that's hot and redeemable is cheap. Anyway, with that being said, this book was awful. I hated every minute of it. The criticism of the book is 100% valid. From a plot and narrative perspective, it's not good. There's so many holes. The narrative can't decide whether or not Ryle is actually a good person. Everything is contradictory. I gave Colleen Hoover a little bit too much credit by saying like, oh my god, she's expertly writing Lily as an unreliable narrator because she's going through her trauma and can't really process that she is experiencing it. But then later on, she never actually confronts any of the things that she said or any of the false pretenses that she was making her decisions based on. So, craft-wise, this book is awful. Narrative-wise, this book is awful. Character-wise, this book is awful. And, of course, overall message-wise, this book is awful. So with that being said, that's the end of the video. Don't check out Colleen Hoover. Don't read her books. You don't
Alright,
have to.
that's
If you
finished.
want to rock your brain, scroll on TikTok for hours on end. It would be more productive than reading a Colleen Hoover book. And if you want to rock
Can you
your
hear
brain,
all my markers crying for mercy as I draw?
Add variations of Listen to Kristen on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Anyway, that's the end of the video. My throat hurts. It's hard work being a hater for 2.5 hours. That's it. I'm done.
I don't want to draw
hate
anything
this
else,
book,
so I'm
but
gonna
I
go
did it
head
for the
out.
content.
Bye.